Okay, so I'm going to be sharing my testimony of how God delivered me from anger, bitterness, unforgiveness, and severe migraine headaches. And I pray that this testimony touches the right ears, and I pray that God gives you ears to hear. Because what good is it for me to get delivered if other people out there are struggling? And I was supposed to do this video a long time ago, so delayed obedience is disobedience, don't we know? So I will start from the beginning, but I will try to keep this hopefully short and sweet. So when I was maybe about 5 or 6, I started getting little headaches. And I would tell my mom, and she would give me like a, you guys remember those little, they probably still have them, I'm not sure, those nasty, like chewable kids Tylenols. And my mom always got the grape flavor. So anyway, my mom started giving me that. And as I got older, she would go to like half a piece of Tylenol or whatever. And I truly believe that this all started because as a kid, I was exposed to grown-up life issues and problems that kids should not have to think about or worry about. But, you know, it's kind of my story. And I love my parents. I have a great relationship with my parents. It's not to knock them, it's just some things I personally feel should not be discussed or talked about in front of your kids. And unfortunately, my parents did. And that caused me at a very young age to have anxiety and to worry about things I should not have been worrying about as a kid. Needless to say, yes, at about 5 or 6, stress and worry came into the picture for me. Fast forwarding to about I would say from the age of about 5 or 6, my headaches got progressively worse. To the point to where I would be in the bed for days at a time, just sick. So they turned into like little headaches to eventually severe migraine headaches. And if you've ever had a migraine headache, it's not just a headache, it affects your eyesight, it affects your sense of smell, hearing, taste. I would throw up until there was nothing left in my stomach to throw up, and I would just gag. And I would just be in excruciating pain. And from the age of I'll just say maybe from the age of 10 maybe to about 22. I don't remember in that time span not waking up and having some form of a headache. Now, during the beginning, I will say my dad and mom were not on the same page so far as their belief in God. My mom, tried to every day read me and my siblings the Word of God and teach us the things of God, and my dad was not on board. But when I turned 7 or 8, my dad gave his life to Christ and became a pastor. But before that, I'll just say some damage was already done. And my parents are great parents. But I will say there were a lot of struggles in our household, and on top of, certain struggles, there was a lot of neglect, disconnect, and very little affection. And when my parents became pastors, when I was about 7, I believe, 7 or 8, I saw my parents show more care to strangers than they did their own kids, me and my siblings. And that, for a long time, created a lot of, I developed a lot of bitterness, because when I was, and just follow with me, track with me, because all of this is important to my testimony and to my story. But that created a lot of anger and bitterness, because from the beginning I already felt a little bit neglected and abandoned and just kind of in a disconnect with my parents. And then on top of that, going from being a young kid to now a teenager, I saw my parents giving more attention to other people and other families than our own family. And then, so from the age of 7 up until I think I was like 15 or 16, before when they decided not to pastor anymore and closed down the church. through those about 10 years, 10 or so years, somewhere in there, you can imagine that a lot of anger and bitterness and resentment happened. And there was a lot of stuff I swept under the rug. So far as like my feelings and emotions and frustrations. Towards my parents and towards those individuals that my parents were shepherding. Because there were a lot of times I can remember one particular time, it was my birthday, and one of the couples in the church was having a stupid fight. And on my birthday, my parents decided to have a counseling session with them, and that was my birthday. But there were a lot of times like that when my parents would drop what they were doing when it was our family time to help other people. And there was no boundaries. People could come and go as they pleased. Our birthdays were not off limits. Our vacations were not off limits. People just had way too much access. And there was very little family time for us. Everything was just always congested and together, and someone's always there, and someone's always needing them. So that created a lot of bitterness and frustration. So when my parents decided to not be pastors anymore and to close the church, then they wanted to be mommy and daddy, and that did not go over well with me or my siblings. And it almost felt like I had no idea who my parents were. And they wanted a relationship with me, and I was just like, and although I was a PK or a pastor's kid, I had no relationship with God. My parents' focus was building everyone else's relationship with God up and not their children. And like I said, I don't fault my parents. They were young and they did the best that they could. But there were consequences, serious consequences for how things were done. So like I said, when the church ended, my parents, it was a very strange time. And I didn't know who my parents were, and they wanted, by this time I was about 15 or 16, and I really wanted nothing to do with God, and I really, didn't really want a relationship with my parents. But like I said, during that time, my my headaches had evolved into migraine headaches. And again, from about the age of 10 to about 21, they got progressively worse to the point to where I couldn't get out of bed. And every morning I was waking up with some form of headache. And I also would have a reoccurring dream that whenever I would try to leave my house, that someone would either shoot me in the head or try to shoot me in the head. But I vividly remember I was 18, I had turned 18, and I was sitting on the couch, and I'm holding my gnome. I was sitting on the couch, and I was conjuring up a plan in my head that was not pleasing to God. And I knew that it wasn't pleasing to God, and I thought, I'm going to do dust and so and dust and so and this and this and this. And I remember vividly hearing the voice of God for the first time. And I won't get into that right now. I will just say that I knew that God spoke to me for the first time. He looked down on me and let me know, I see you. You're not invisible to me. I know you. And what you're thinking about doing and what you're planning on doing, don't do it. And it was the greatest day, the greatest experience of my life. I was in awe. I was amazed that God thought enough of me to first of all stop me from making a really stupid decision that I would have regretted, and that He just thought enough of me to say, hey, I know who you are. I made you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you are precious to me. You matter. And that changed everything for me. And that day began a long journey of me chasing Him, because I was so hungry to hear His voice again. And it was years later before I heard it again, but I was determined to chase after Him and to hear Him and to follow Him. And from the age of 18 to now being almost 36, I've said yes to Him. And it may not always be on time when He tells me, but He always has my yes. And there's way more I'm going to share. This is that's not even that's basically just a tidbit of my story, but I'm gonna do a part 2 because I don't want these videos to be too long. But it gets very, very, very good, and yeah, it's gonna be encouraging. It's gonna help someone. I pray that it helps someone. So I'm gonna do a part 2. Okay,